Anyway, so we have a document that we'll be putting up shortly, which is what we presented to the CRTC, and then we've just recently got a response. We'll talk about that, and then open it to questions about especially tangible benefits and proposals that you might be considering, and things that we can move forward with as an association. Okay, so welcome, John.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to thank the techies over there who still seem to be in a state of total confusion. I don't know what's going on, but obviously it's their first time. I mean, Connie, thank you very much for the invitation to be here today, and Michelle, thank you for being here at all. Also, I should be a little circumspect because Peter from CTV probably knows more about CRTC than I do, and Peter is the hero of the Olympic Games, by the way, as you probably all know. He was the lead figure on the techie side of running the Olympics, and I've been at 3 Olympics now, and I've never seen one filmed as well as the last one. My family are all crazy skiers, so we had to, my wife literally wouldn't answer the phone for the 2 weeks while she was watching it. Anyway, I probably have to back up a little bit on this. In fact, I probably have to go back to about 2002. And what has been bothering all of us broadcast educators, I was formerly the chair of the School of Radio and Television Arts at Ryerson. And what seemed to be sort of unfair was that there was these huge sums of money which were required by the CRTC to be given to worthwhile causes at the time of any transfer of a license. And as you know, we've had some huge transfers, including the CTV transfer of ownership. And I was involved with CTV prior to that time, and I know that very well. But this business of broadcasting has been throwing up these huge sums of money, which very roughly speaking are about 10% of the price. So we've had millions of dollars which has been available, and that millions of dollars has been for what are called significant benefits. At the same time, we've had another set of policies, and these are not regulations, these are policies of the CRTC. We've had another set of policies which requires the radio broadcasters to make donations to good causes, and that money also, one would have hoped, might be flowing towards the schools that need it, that produce the students that are going to be the future of broadcasting. Unfortunately, that's not the way it works for reasons that I will explain. So we have 2002, Brian Antonson and Laurel Ann and myself working on this problem. 2006, Brian Antonson is working on this problem again, appears at the CRTC with the same problems in mind, that the money doesn't seem to be able to flow towards the schools that need it. And that application in 2006 is turned down. We now have a new chairman, we have a number of new commissioners, and Brian, almost as a, I guess we could call it as his parting gift to BIAC, once more mounted a very effective campaign in order to try to encourage CRTC to change its mind. So that brings us up to the present. Let me just again explain very, very briefly where the policy is and what it's called. It has a rather frightening title to it, and there's 2 of them. Remember that they're different. One is with respect to transfers of ownership, the significant benefits package, and the other are the contributions to be made by radio stations. And both of those policies of the CRTC that are imposed on the industry. So with Laurel Ann and with my help, Brian had produced a document which was the document that we used to speak to the CRTC. And the 2 phases of that. There's a public notice called the Application of Benefits Test at the time of transfers of ownership. And then there is the second one, the Commercial Radio Policy of 2006, plus another public notice attached to it, Contributions by Radio Stations to Canadian Content Development. It's known as CCD, for those who are interested in it. It used to be called Canadian Talent Development. It was known as CTD, and some of you may indeed have had some benefit from that. So the brief is put together, and it's an extensive brief. It makes a number of good arguments as to why the broadcast schools should be allowed to get the benefit of these two policies. But I'll tell you the difficulty that is in the language of these policies. First, with respect to these significant benefits, which are the transfers of ownership, it says scholarships in broadcasting or broadcast-related fields also constitute tangible benefits. That's fine. That's very nice, and that means that you can ask your local broadcasters, the radio broadcasters, if they would give some of their money towards your scholarships. The trouble with scholarships is it tends to benefit the top 2% in your classes, and it doesn't filter down, and it is no help at all with all the heavy infrastructure costs that you have. Perhaps you might be going to high def, I'm sure you are, things like that. And those are the benefits to all of the students. So you can give a scholarship, but the scholarship by its nature is limited, as I just said. And what wording our little team came up with was that scholarships and capital grants should qualify. And capital grants would have meant that the money could have been given to the school, and the school would then have enough sense to apportion that in a manner that would be satisfactory to the broadcaster who was good enough to give the money in the first place. Okay, so that is the limitation that we have on the grants and contributions. That is at the time of a transfer, and those are those huge sums of money. So the most that we can get out of that would be the scholarships. And then the second aspect to this is the contributions by the radio stations. So you go to the radio station, you ask, please sir, would you donate some of your money to our school? And this runs into a much more difficult situation. It says scholarships will qualify. Oh great, okay, so we're in the same category. To narrow a category, we would have preferred to see that being monies that could come in for all sorts of projects, but scholarships, okay. But then it goes on to say, grants to those organizations offering courses in broadcasting or devoted to the continuing education of radio staff will not qualify. Now, where on earth did that come from? As far as I can remember, and this is back in some sort of a dark age, what the CRTC was concerned about was the type of broadcast school, in quotes, not a recognized, not a school that was provincially administered, but they were the kind of school where you saw a small ad in Esquire magazine saying, you too can be in broadcasting. Just try our voice test, phone this number, you know, the kind of thing. So I think that is the background. I may be wrong, there may be something else. There's also this sort of hesitation about the broadcasters giving money to people who are going to become broadcasters. Personally, I don't buy that, but that seems to be an underlying hesitation of the CRTC. So a very good brief was put in, and the recommendation on this second part, when we're dealing with contributions by radio stations alone, the recommendation there was expenditures qualify when they support students engaged in music, radio, television, broadcast journalism, film, new media, animation, and other artistic studies. Capital grants to our institutions offering training in broadcasting and related industries also will qualify. That seems to me where we hope to get with respect to donations which might be made to radio stations. So having prepared all the material and sent it off to CRTC, the chair of CRTC advised that there was an opportunity for the three of us to appear in front of the commission at the CRTC. And that took place on the
March 24th.
March 24th, so we got to back up several weeks from it. And we appeared there in a room which seemed to be full of technical equipment, huge screens hanging down, quite formal, with the chairman sitting at one end, all the commissioners surrounding him, and the three of us, like mice sitting at the back, trying to look modest but excited. We were excited. It was a good presentation. I'm going to ask Laurel Ann if she will pick up from there, because she had the pulse of the room, and it's quite important.
Intimidating was the pulse of the room. No, the experience was interesting, but and certainly John has been giving you a very solid background on our presentation. We were there to obviously present these wording changes, but to also answer any questions that they had, and we had no idea what would be asked at the presentation. So we did make the presentation, and it is a very large boardroom with microphones that you have to turn on every time you speak, and cameras on you as soon as you get in, and people behind you can hear talking, but you don't know what they're doing. So it was a very interesting atmosphere. And we made the presentation. Of course, it went through the wording as John has explained, and our feeling, and then opened it up to questions. And what was interesting is the response that we felt at the end of our presentation was that we were getting, the questions they were asking were things that we were updating them on programs. And I specifically was talking more from a broadcast educator's point of view about what we're teaching, and there was a lot of questions and a lot of head nodding. So we felt we had a very positive vibe when we walked out of there, that there were several commissioners that were nodding with the response to what we're doing and what we're teaching. We talked about the equipment, so we talked about multitasking, about students that are uploading stories to the web, to television and radio, and the kind of the repurposing of content and the overlap of some of the programs, and how we're starting to deal with that. I'm speaking there from a broadcast educator's point of view, so I was not speaking directly about Fanshawe, because everybody else is different, but we were talking about the fact that as broadcast educators across the country, we're all dealing with different issues slightly, but that we were there as a representation of broadcast educators across the country to make these changes, because we hear those things at our conferences, and that's why these sessions and these sort of things are good as far as collaborating and airing issues that are, we're having problems with. A couple of the questions that were interesting that they came back with, kind of comments and questions. One, they were really pushing the Francophone component of our organization, and they wanted to know how many French-speaking schools we had. And we have initiated Francophone schools in Quebec and across the country that are Francophone. We're not necessarily getting a lot of members from those colleges and universities. So we have tried, and we will continue to try. And of course, I said that it was a constant, recruitment to try to get new members. The other thing that they wanted to know about, and I thought this was interesting, this was from the chairman himself. Conrad mentioned that he wondered why so many programs are still separate, and why they have radio programs and journalism programs and television programs, and if everybody's overlapping in the industry, why are we not just having amalgamated programs again? It was one of those things that we all kind of went. I thought, okay, I'm not going to get into this here, but it wasn't a question that he wanted an answer from. It was more of a comment. And, if they're truly, people are out there truly multitasking and doing it all, why are the colleges and universities not overlapping? And I did, my answer was only from examples that I knew of, and I just said that there are several that have done that. There are several that are collaborative programs with universities and colleges that are working, several that are overlapping and repurposing content, sharing content, journalism programs that are providing content for the radio station that they're running, as well as the television station at their campus and on the web and internet streaming live. So we are doing that. And I had all my tools out. So I had my Mac and my iPhone, and because they were all interested in how much we're doing with that, and that's where we got a lot of the head nodding, was that they understand that that we're trying to keep up with technology as faculty and educators. We're trying to keep up with technology. We're trying to put technological tools in the hands of our students, so they're up to date, and we're catching up. But hands are tied in our institutions because of funding, and where we can go from that. And we need the support of broadcasters, and we do have that support from broadcasters, and strong support from that. But these are some things that could help. And that's so that was kind of the feeling, is that when we left there, we had a couple commissioners actually come up to us and said, this was great, when you put in your proposal, where we're behind you, we'll try to push it through. And we went out and went, good, that's great. We thought we had some good support. So Michelle, you said, look, you asked us a question.
I was thinking of the 2006 when presentations went, we had the broadcasters actually change their pitches to say that they supported the educators being part of this capital grant. So it isn't even like the broadcasters aren't. You know what I mean?
Yes, yes.
So we've got all the support happening yet.
Yeah. Oh, yes, we know the support's there,
Yeah.
because they their hands are tied, and that's the problem, is their hands are tied with the wording. So we just wanted some room to move there.
I think I'd mentioned that insofar as the radio stations giving contributions are concerned, the language in there specifically recognizes schools of journalism, but not schools of broadcasting. And of course, we drew that to the Commission's attention. And I know at Ryerson, the journalism kids seem to be doing exactly what the broadcast kids are doing about half the time, camera on shoulder and remotes and all the rest of it. Also, it was obvious that we'd mentioned that the schools are producing a ton of Canadian content every day, and that the schools are actually teaching the new media, which was the subject that Conrad von Finkelstein, the chairman, was so interested in. So I thought Brian and frankly, I thought we'd pulled together a very good document that Brian had produced, and so it goes. One of the commissioners, Steve Simpson, he was the first questioner to us, and my recollection is that he started off saying something like, oh, well, this sounds like a very good idea. He seemed to be in favor of it. Another commissioner from Toronto gave the impression that he was also very supportive, as I recall, and there were a couple of commissioners who I know very well who perhaps were not as supportive or had a different view, and they didn't say very much, but anyway, so it goes. So that's the background to it, if you can keep that sort of information in hand. And then quite recently, Laurel Ann, in her capacity as president, received a letter from the CRTC, and this came from Michael Amodio, who's the manager of radio policy. And we can look at this letter, I think, skid down to, if you can move it up again, a little more. Okay, just hold it there for a moment. The commission's, he is dealing with the Canadian content development, which is the radio side of the thing. He mentions in the third line there, commission's policies related to tangible benefits and Canadian content development. as far as I can make out, he didn't deal with the tangible benefits, which is the money arising out of the sums available from transfers of ownership, but he certainly does deal with Canadian content development. So we're reading down there, and I got to the third paragraph. The Commission's approach to contributions to CCD in relation to applications for the transfer of ownership or control of radio stations was also updated a few paragraphs later in a public notice and based upon the description of eligible initiatives found in that public notice. I didn't find this document very clear, I must admit. But then he goes on to say that he's referring to another public notice in the last paragraph on the screen. Regarding ineligible initiatives, the Commission maintains its position that grants to schools and educational institutions offering courses in broadcasting will not qualify. So that's kind of the kiss of death on the CCD side of the thing. If we can roll up, the first line here is the one that's so troublesome. This long-standing position reflects the perception that such contributions on the part of broadcasters are self-serving. And somehow, I don't know whether we couldn't get our message across, I fear that somehow these are broadcasters looking after themselves. And yet, the whole point of education is to turn out a student who is absolutely up to date, who's got all the new media under his or her belt, and are ready to move into an industry which by definition is now getting broader and broader, including the internet and areas that CRTC doesn't regulate. Nonetheless, your students seem to be caught by the fact that the broadcasters are somehow going to be self-serving if the monies are given to the colleges except for the purposes of scholarships. It then goes on, let me just see a quick exam, which was included. There was a broad review, the radio review since 1995. There's no plan for such a review in the immediate future. And then they discuss a few of the places in which there have been exceptions to the rule, including the third paragraph there, which will be of interest to Peter. The contribution to the BCE New Media Center of Excellence of BCIT was made in the context of the transfer of ownership of CTV and clearly conformed to the Commission's policy on significant benefits offered in relation to the transfer of television stations. Well, if that grant conformed, why can't all other requests conform in the same way? Because that money was put directly into BCIT. Anybody comment from BCIT on that?
What do you mean?
No. Anyway, and then they go on to look at other initiatives that took place. Chum's proposal to fund the Canadian Artists Multimedia Project at Fanshawe College, and so on and so forth. But the point being, they're saying that these are, this is a point I made at the hearing, this is not locked in stone in regulations, these are CRTC policies, and he recognizes that it's not codified in regulations. Well, that's right, so it's easy to change. You just send out a letter. Unfortunately, perhaps this is the letter that we got, and he goes on to say, I hope this clarifies the situation. Well, since then, Brian has been looking into the situation as best he can, and we have a slight hope that this may not cover the significant benefits, which is the large sums of money that come available. We had a slight hope that that this letter, when we got it, might have allowed all of you to ask CanWest's purchaser, which is Shaw Communications Limited, to ask Shaw if they might divert a little of the funds towards this. But lying behind this, something else is happening, because Brian has learned that there is some kind of change in the wind with respect to this area, it is still possible that there may be something coming out either of the Shaw Limited application to buy stations of CanWest or from the CRTC itself, which will change the direction of what happens to significant benefits. That's a possibility. But for the moment, we've got this rather confusing and somewhat negative letter back from the CRTC. So maybe it's 3 strikes, you're out, or maybe we just go on to another game. I can't tell which. So would you add anything to that I've missed?
No, you haven't missed anything. I just would say that, you know, I mean, I was glad John went through this, because I mean, I read it the first time and thought it was jumping all over the place, and it wasn't very clear. But I also think that they seem to be very concerned about the wording between policies and regulations, and the comment at the end about regulations. I think that they are still up for challenges, and I think that the vibe that we got there was that, like any large organization, you know, when you, I mean, I'm not saying that we could read the room, but you could see that there were people that I think realize that, you know, things that are cut in stone. There are people that are sticking to them, and there's people that are a little bit more open to those changes. And so I don't think it's dead. I think it's something that just needs challenges. And our approach from the BAC was, you know, in the past, when these tangible benefits issues have come up, colleges have all scrambled, and some of the colleges have done very well. And one of the comments at one of our conferences a couple of years ago was some of the smaller colleges that are our members were saying, well, you know, we'd love to put in a tangible benefit proposal, but I don't know how to do that. What do I do? And I don't have any support, and people at my institution wouldn't know how to do that. So we started having these tangible benefits, and Michelle was quite involved in the CRTC commission with John and Brian, who, you know, Brian loves this stuff. So Brian, and they did a few sessions on this, and this was my first experience going to CRTC, and it was thrilling. But you know, it's something that I think that if you like a challenge, I think there's lots of opportunity there. We put a proposal in several years ago with the CTV. With the CTV purchase of CHUM, and we did it as a BAC organization, and that had never been done before. And we said, well, why not? Everybody, my college was putting one in, everybody was putting in proposals, and those are individual, and you have to kind of maybe take your hat off as the institution person for there and think of it as an organization. What can we do? And I think we have an opportunity to benefit other broadcasters across the country by working as a team, by working as an organization. Broadcast media, we like to add the word media in there now, broadcast media educators across the country, is we do represent colleges across the country. And there are colleges that are small, and there are the colleges that are large, and it doesn't necessarily always seem fair that, you know, the Ryersons or and I don't want to say BCIT, but BCIT's done very well. Fanshawe, you know, that was mainly Duff Roman. I mean, I know it's connections, it's who you know sometimes, it's sometimes how organized those institutions are for going after opportunities, and so be it that they do. However, the BAC has an opportunity as a nonprofit organization across the country to represent all broadcast educators and put in proposals. And I think that that's something that can go forward with, you know, the boards ahead of us in the next decade to continue to push and fight and make changes, because we're the ones that are training those content providers, those creative talents. We deal with those students, and we also then deal with the industry. So, you know, we meet with people at CTV, and I sat down with Peter, and we talked about, you know, what kind of things are you looking for in our students, and they know what they want. We then in turn go and turn that back to our students and say, this is what, you know, you're going to have to do if you want to get an industry. You're going to get your foot in the door. You're going to need this skills. You're going to need to know, you know, about HD and digital. These are the things you need to know. So we're constantly translating that communications. We're the liaison between the industry and our students, and because we are from the industry, and we are now wearing these other hats as educators. So we need to make sure the commission knows that, as a representation of broadcasting in Canada, we're here too, hello. And we're dealing with those future creators, those future animators. And that's the thing I was trying to express at the CRTC Commission, that, creative talent and emerging talent is not just somebody who is a musician, it's not just an artist, it's an animator, it's a video producer, it's a documentary producer, it's an editor. We are training those students, and they're coming out, and the work that they're coming out with is now going viral. It's not just going, to their stations, it's going, they're bypassing and finding ways to get their names out there. And we're gonna lose a lot of that if we don't have an opportunity to encourage it, but also open people's eyes to make some changes.
I told one silly little story at the CRTC that they kind of appreciated, and that was when I was teaching at Ryerson. Now all the kids had these laptops flipped up in front of them during the session, and at the end of it I had one of the students that I was chatting with, and I said to her, what are they all doing on those screens? And she said, you don't want to know. And the CRTC found that was kind of fun. But I think the point is that you all have very close contacts with your local broadcasters. You relish those, and they're important to you. Maybe they can advise a little bit on this situation. Maybe they have some insight. They are speaking with the CRTC on a regular basis. Well, each of you in your own schools will be hearing about these kinds of changes that come from CRTC. If you could filter that back to BEAC, then there can be a kind of collection of information there. Rumors are gratefully received in this business, and so I just hope that we can keep at this, and I think Brian Antonson has got to get the Never Give Up Hound Dog of the Year award. I mean, he's just been following this, and there is no doubt in my mind, or in Laurel Ann's, or in Brian's, that we have a lot of support in the room, and somehow we'd like to see if that can be amplified.
Yeah, definitely. Go ahead, Kathy.
There seems to be a lot of emphasis on the self-serving phrase.
Yes.
There must be very specific language in policies that states that, broadcasters, these are tangible benefits, these are benefits that have to go to the community. And not benefit you directly.
Mm-hmm. If there was, I haven't found it.
There isn't.
In other words, there's just the total, what I call the total ban, grants to those organizations offering courses in broadcasting or devoted to the continuing education of radio staff will not qualify. It's just a boom, the door is shut.
But I guess what I'm saying is in the original policy. Oh, sorry. I was saying if I got one of these in my hands. I just wonder if in the original wording of tangible benefits or significant benefits, if it states very clearly that the broadcasters cannot directly benefit from those monies that are going out. You know what I mean? Because they seem to keep coming back to that phrase since this began.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if the trick is to convince them somehow that the broadcasters won't directly benefit from this, and maybe part of the key is what Laurel Ann just touched on is, internet, and so, well, this isn't really benefiting the broadcasters directly. We're producing people who produce things to not go for broadcast necessarily. It's going to a wider audience. I don't know.
I'm sure your students go into forms of journalism. I'm sure your students go into the advertising business. I'm sure they go into technical. I'm sure they go into a small private independent production of widgets. They're obviously so savvy in the internet. I'll never catch up. And so on and so forth. So I think your point is I just can't find anywhere a big description of why this is self-serving, as if it seems to be built in. But I couldn't
Right.
identify other than the resultant language on it. I know that's been raised at discussions over the years as being a sort of impediment here, but I can't tell you that it's been put into the policy as a clear expression, which then, in a sense, we could try to knock over as not being reasonable. We tried anyway to knock it over because we felt that that was in the air, as it were.
I think one of the key elements might be here, or the prompts for us, is the reference to the two projects, the BCIT and the FANJA projects, because it does say that you're free to still apply as an exception, and so perhaps the BEAC can facilitate that by getting some feedback on their original proposals that they put in. I don't have the written one for FANJA. It was done through our Music Industry Arts program, but I do know that it was Duff Roman who approached one of our faculty members and said, we have something coming up. Would you like to put a proposal in? So I think it was a scramble, but whatever wording is in there, I think that's maybe a little bit of a encouragement. I like to look at that as the positive paragraph in there after the self-serving negative, is that maybe that's saying that, it's always open though for our interpretation and to maybe approach it differently. And that to me is a challenge. That to me is asking for them to say, that's them saying, challenge us. And, we're not saying, we won't say no, but we're not changing the way we do things right now.
Just a personal note, I'm pleased to volunteer anytime. My experience with CRTC, both to BIAC and to you individually, so just take that as a given. I'm pleased to do it.
You should know that John is on the, officially on the CRTC, our CRTC committee as our consultant and guru. And Michelle McManus, who just stepped out for a moment, Michelle is on the committee with me as well. So we do encourage, if you are interested, if you have colleagues in your colleges and universities that are interested in the CRTC, to join that committee. Everyone that's a member of the BEAC, we're always looking to encourage more people on those committees. It always tends to be the board people that are on the committee, and we always do have a board member on there to help guide it, but we really do need people who have interests, and we have several committees we'll talk about later that you can get involved in. So that's one of them to consider. Savannah, you have any questions?
Just a comment on the self-serving. Our focus has been about how we're training the future employees for these broadcasters. I'm wondering if our next try at that might be about how we are creating benefits to our community with these students that we're training. Not the broadcasters, but how we're bringing stories to the community, enriching our community, and really try and hit it from a different angle now. Okay, it's not about us training for the broadcasters. Yes, we are. But it's about us training them to contribute to the community, because I think that's what you're saying, right? Is that they want to see how we're the tangible benefits is about how it's serving Canadians.
Well, and local is hot right now. Anything local has been neglected, or is being,
Right.
considered to be
Yeah.
neglected. So it's a hot button right now, and community is perfect.
So yeah, I think maybe that's just a suggestion, is the next pitches that go out is more about how we are enabling our students to serve their community, especially with the new media now, right? By getting the stories out in more ways than just broadcasting.
I just want to, not to interrupt, that's rude, but I just want to read this one paragraph of Brian's, because I think it's important in the submission. We train the people who will entertain and inform Canadians on radio and television for years to come. We train the people who will report Canadian news, who will play Canadian music, who will create Canadian music videos and commercial campaigns and drama and variety programming. who will use information technology to produce stimulating animation and web images that will be seen and used by Canadians every single day of their lives. So that's, I think, trying to get in your direction, but I agree very much with what you said.
Yeah, and I'm just saying maybe that's gonna, I'm just saying that this might be another way to get there.
Yep.
Is to make that the focus and take out the mention of how we get people to train for the industry.
You suggested that, you know, the students that we have might fill that local void. I mean, since the
Yes.
local program is going away, or, you know, our students can very easily fill that void.
Yeah.
They're doing it now.
Yes, they are. And I think that's when we were at the commission, I think that's why we heard, we got all those, the head nodding is when we talked about that. We talked about the kinds of programming that we're all doing. Like I mentioned that there's several institutions that run their own stations that have stuff on the internet. I said, our students are putting their stuff right up on YouTube. And they see that as just, you know, as they put everything up. I mean, you know, which is sometimes not the best thing, but I mean, they don't see any limitations. They just see, I have creative work, and I'm sharing it, and they're happy to share. And I think that the one thing that you know, why the commission is there is to protect our country's, you know, broadcasting and media, and that we don't want to lose these people. We don't want to lose them and have them go elsewhere. So I mean, let's look at ways to motivate and keep that going, and with the support of broadcasters and media outlets, as well as you know, the opportunity for, I mean, it's not just about the equipment, and it has been in the past sometimes, but it's about, you know, that support, and it's also for the smaller colleges that are struggling too, you know, that are out there that are trying to, you know, to do what they can with limited funds too. So, any other questions?
I don't want to take this down a different tack than you've been pursuing, but I was with Connie last week at the broadcaster, or the BC Association of Broadcasters, and we had several panels. One was on television, one was on radio, and I know that many of the large broadcasters have been wonderful to us. CTV, of course, with its diversity for, or donation for diversity purposes to BIAC. But we were, the few educators in the room, it was primarily a broadcast conference, were sort of shocked when, and I cannot remember the man's name, but the head of Chum Radio in BC said one of the things we needed to be doing, we as in a broadcast industry, needed to quit wasting money on college community radio stations. And I wondered if there was any undercurrent of negativity or an unwillingness to support broadcast education that might be filtering through to the CRTC that either we're not aware of or has some maybe power that we are not seeing, because the tension in the room then was palpable, but it seemed to be an opinion that was what was shared by many of the broadcasters in the room, and I was a little shocked by that and unnerved, but I just wondered, John, if you had any opinion on that.
It's interesting you mentioned that, because if you tune into the CRTC's website soundtrack, you will hear either now or in about an hour a show cause hearing as to why the license of the radio station at Ryerson should be renewed or not. And I think there's been a lot of difficulty with these stations. Either they become radicalized, or the funding that is given to them is not looked after properly in an accounting way, or the programming drops off so that they just become a kind of automated station. So they've had the difficulties, and it may be that kind of frustration, but you felt this was almost a consensus in the room, that there was difficulty with these stations.
I think that would be probably stating it a little over the top, but there was certainly support.
There was interest in
Yes.
in the subject, and
That's why you're the lawyer on
yeah,
that.
and of course in some cases these local type of community stations. They get a community license, and some of them are embedded within a college or university, as you know. I think that's the way they're doing it now. And it's these community licenses that maybe the broadcasters have supported them in terms of, oh, well, we'll help you, this is good for the industry, here's our old cameras, here's our old sound systems and amplifiers, that sort of thing. So it may be frustration that is being expressed there, but it's funny you mentioned it, because I have to follow this one and see what's happening, and I'm going to tune in and try to find out. And I don't know if this is a problem across the board for CRTC, which they have been mentioning back to the broadcasters. In a way, I suppose these stations are some very low-level kind of competition to good broadcasting. If they're doing it badly, that may be part of the frustration. But that's all I know about it.
One of the other comments many of them made was that they weren't necessarily looking to the broadcast training institutions for their personnel. They wanted to, find some wonderful waitress in a restaurant who had fabulous pipes and take her along and nurture her and make her what they wanted her to be for that station. So
yes.
Perhaps it's that they don't see all of their people coming from particular institutions.
I'm told that Ryerson's School of Radio and Television Arts has no relationship with this. I think it's called CKLN. I may have the call letters wrong, but that's my understanding.
Any other questions? No?
I can make a comment on the broadcast.
Okay. Please.
I won't speak for Chum, because I don't have much to do with radio, although the director of radio engineering is in the office next to me.
Sorry, can't see you, Peter.
I'm sorry. When
Thank
we
you.
talk about self-serving, I think it is self-serving, but it's self-serving to all broadcasters. You know, like and I'm not speaking for the people at the 5th floor down at 299 Queen that make all these CRTC decisions.
Excuse me, it's still on mute.
Oh, sorry. There we go. But it is self-serving when CTV or Chum donate all this money that they're mandated by the CRTC. Of course, we want it to go to something that's going to benefit us, but that means it's going to benefit CanWest, it's going to benefit Shaw, which is fine. That's the whole, so I think it's self-serving to an industry. Not as much self-serving to us at CTV, although we hope to get your best and brightest, and we go out and, it's too bad there's someone up from CanWest here and, and from Rogers sitting next to me, which would be good. From my view, what the CRTC, and I have very little to do with anything CRTC related, but I did happen to watch the community television hearings last week, just because my wife works for Rogers Community Television, and I watched it. And one really interesting comment that came out is when the commissioners grilled Rogers community channels on how come they're not diverting some of that 2% into their websites. And it's new media and that. And the reason is it's not written in it's very defined what the CRTC says they can use that 2% of their cable profits for, and it doesn't say they can use it for websites. So I think broadcasters they're not scared of the CRTC, but they always follow those rulings to the letter. And if it's not defined in there, that you can do that. On to these big benefits, and I'm going back to my days, I was a professor at Niagara College in the broadcasting department, and I know it was always frustrating because I was also associated with CTV in some ways, and I said, look, go after this money, it's out there, the broadcasters have to spend it. One problem I found from the college at the time was that there was lack of buy-in from senior management at the college. So from the broadcasting department, you could do these great proposals, but I think for these to work, it has to go up that chain of command that, you almost have to go as high as the president of your college, that they have to make a contact at the 5th floor at 299 Queen to talk to CTV. And I think that's where it goes, and trying to get that buy-in from, senior management at those colleges to get this money. But I don't understand it because it's free money, it's out there. But you all run into that. I know at Niagara, broadcasting, although it's an oversubscribed program, they have, huge, placement rates. We have students working all over the world. But from a college point of view, it's not, making wine and doing tourism, which is where, their bread and butter, what they feel their bread and butter is. So from looking at both sides, that's where I see it. But I know you know, from my point of view from CTV, and I work with the engineering and operations departments across the country, that it's in our best interest to have the best students coming out, you know, and then it's up to us to try to convince you guys to send them to us. You know, and when they say they don't want to hire, you know, students from colleges, and again, I can't speak for radio, but I was thinking when I walked up here from the GO train station today, and I'd like to get the stats from our HR department to see how many people we've hired full-time in the last 10 years that haven't done an internship at CTV from a college. And I can't remember, and I wouldn't be able to tell you one person that we haven't hired that wasn't a college intern at some point, you know, at CTV, or some point somewhere before they came, you know, to Toronto. So, you know, do we hire college grads and university grads? Absolutely. That's where they come from. That's our bread and butter. We bring them in, and we get, like, you know, Laurel's in there with their interns, like I was with you guys when you found your intern sitting in a studio down in Discovery, you know, and then I know from Niagara we have interns every year, you know, so, but trying to go after that money, you know, I think the buy-in has to be from, you know, the buy-in almost should be from the provincial government, who, you know, you're all provincial institutions. Why isn't one government going to the other to say, hey, look, all these broadcasters are mandated by the federal government to give this money out? You know, how come the colleges aren't saying, or the Ministry of Colleges in each province saying, you know, you should, you know, I divert some of that to us that we can utilize in the broadcasting. You know, that's just, you know, from my point, and from, you know, from broadcasters it can be as frustrating, and I know you've seen it, you work with CTV, that, you know, you gotta fall within that framework, you know, and it's, you know, if they say you can't donate, you know, to capital in a college, you know, because it's self-serving, and the CRTC say that's what they're stuck. You know, that's how it, you know, they take it so literally, you know, and that's sort of how that whole CRTC, you know, has been. You know.
Peter, exactly. We have circumstances described to us where the broadcaster said, "I'd love to give you the money, but," and the "but" is right up on the screen there.
Yeah.
So.
And I'm going to throw that back out as another challenge as we close also, is to think about the fact that individually as colleges, yes, you know, you will benefit by putting proposals in, but think about from a BAC point of view, we did put a proposal together for the CTV CHUM for diversity. It benefited the CRT, the BAC. It benefits CTV. We've got diversity videos that our students are now producing, that are testimonials of people out there in the industry that are working from a diverse background to act as mentors for our students that are coming up. So it works. That's a community involvement that works for everybody. It works for the benefactor, CTV, works for the BAC. So I throw it out to you as a challenge for this next year and for the upcoming Shaw pitch, which means you got to scramble quick, is to consider what benefits might be something that's national that the BAC could put in that would make it something that could be an exception to the rule. That you know, I think the big picture is much easier for organizations to see the benefit than if it's one individual institution, because you know it's usually a connection with a person, it tends to be, and you know, by doing something that might be shared by, you know, the Camosans and you know, in Victoria, the small to Ryerson and the larger institutions. You know, and Nova Scotia Community College and East Coast. I mean, we've got, and you know, and that to me is something then that every member benefits from. So whether it's internship, you know, proposals, whether it's community involvement, whether it's creative work, you know, where could we benefit as an organization, or what would benefit our members as faculty members? Where do we need help? You know, and if it's funding, what is it funding for? And maybe it's professional development, you know, maybe it's for something else. I mean, consider that, because that might be that unique package that is too easy to say, you know, or too difficult, I should say, to say no to. That might be the one that works. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
John?